Join UF Hall of Famer and 14-year NFL vet Shane Matthews every weekday as he brings you all you need to know about your Florida Gators, including news, analysis, and opinions with some of the biggest names in sports. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Or watch us live at 8 a.m. on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
The game that's coming up. But yes, we're excited about that, but we're also excited about another weekend of SEC football.
Yeah, it's always fun when Florida Georgia rolls around. It's probably the game that I think gets the most planning in terms of like how far ahead you have to go.
Yes.
In terms of like setting everything up, finding a place to stay, getting your parking and all that stuff. I actually have been to the last 7 in a row, so that streak's probably gonna get broken this weekend. But I am a veteran of the cocktail party.
Well, Jake, it is the biggest event in this city for ever, frankly, and there is a lot of excitement, and it's growing. I think everybody knows, obviously, that Georgia is the favorite and a big favorite in the game. And the amazing thing about Georgia, Florida, Georgia is there are, and Jake, you've seen this, there are as many or more people in the area around the stadium, frankly, as there are in the stadium. So it is probably from, I would say tonight until the wee hours of Sunday morning. I mean, it generates $20 million for the city, and there's really nothing that goes on throughout the year, even with the Jaguars here, that frankly comes close to this weekend.
Yeah, and you mentioned how big that is for the city, and we're having all this debate now. It seems we've been having it for the last several years about is the game going to move? Should it be moved? If it's moved, what should the format be? And so on and so forth.
Well, that is obviously one of the big topics here, and it won't be solved immediately. I mean, there have been times to where the city of Jacksonville has come out and made some kind of announcement the week of the game. That's not going to happen because the game is here this year. Obviously, next year in 2023, there are options for 24 and 25. I think the city of Jacksonville is going to do all it can to keep it, and that may mean throwing an amazing amount of money at both teams for that to happen. And again, what we have to remember is one of the few true neutral site games that still are played. I mean, obviously Red River with Oklahoma and Texas and Army Navy, wherever that will be played on a yearly basis. The game here is very rare, and there are a lot of speculations on what happens when the contract runs out. Does it stay here? Does it go to each campus? or is there some kind of a hybrid compromise, Jay, such as a year in Florida, a year in Athens, and a year in Jacksonville? Right now, we just don't know. But I know the city is determined that they want to keep it here. And certainly, Jake, if you're a politician in this town, you don't want to be the person that loses that game.
Oh yeah, be held against you for the rest of your life. Be the first thing anybody mentions about it if they're a Gator fan. But I don't know, Brent. I don't know if it is that neutral site, because that's Georgia's argument, is that they have to travel much farther than Florida does. They say they're basically giving up a home game for this.
Yeah. But in what Kirby Smart continues with that argument is that has hurt recruiting. Well, it hasn't. Look, anybody who's followed recruiting knows over the last basically decade, certainly since Kirby has been there, Georgia's either 1, 2, or 3 in recruiting. So, look, if you just want to make the argument that you want another home game, I get that. Florida, you're in that. But this argument of it hurts recruiting to me just doesn't hold water, Jake, because that's just simply not true. One game outside of Athens is not going to hurt what you do. To me, it almost enhances it, because you're on display not in Athens but in the northern Florida area, so that should be a real help for them. So again, I mean, I get the argument that both teams want a home game, but it's not affecting recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. When you're still pulling top 5, number 1 classes, and you lose this home game, I mean, is there really any water to saying, hey, we can't recruit as much as we need to? I mean, I think the solution is, I don't know how feasible it is, but just let them bring recruits to the game. I mean, just give them X amount. It doesn't have to be a big amount, but you can actually use that as a big bargaining chip for your really big time recruits. And I think that would be a little bit of a solution there that could probably get hammered out. Let me tell you about one of our live reads. Are you in the market to buy or sell a home, Brent? Because Doreen Levy, a realtor with Coldwell Banker MM Parrish, will provide you with fast, friendly, and reliable service. Call her today at 352-562-1411 to help your dreams come home. Brent, not only do we have this game going on this week, but there's a lot of big games. But I want to ask you, we have a viewer question. What is probably one of your favorite memories about this game, you being a first coaster?
And I've been to a lot of them in the stands and in the press box. So I think one, Jake, that I will never forget, and this is really before the current stadium was built, when this was the old Gator Bowl. I'll never forget being actually covering the game for CBS Sports and giving basically a report after every score. And we just had do you remember the game years ago? We just had an absolute deluge. And I was trying to find somewhere where it was dry in order to give some reports. And the Gators won that game. It was close because of the rain for both teams. They didn't score a lot, but I know that's something that I remember. And I think the one that I may remember most of all was Florida, because of Spurrier, had a stranglehold on the series, and Georgia won. And I remember being outside the stadium after this long winning streak with the Gators was snapped, and there were some people that made the analogy, and I laughed about it, but I thought about it later, and I thought, well, that rather describes it. It was like people who'd been in jail for 20 years who just got out. The euphoria was just absolutely amazing, frankly. But except Jake, except that there have been very few true upsets in this series. Usually, the best team with the best talent usually wins. Now, obviously, in 1980, we had the Run, Lindsey, Run. But beyond that, I would be fascinated to know how many times the favorites won, and I would say probably most of the time that has happened. So, but as far as seeing, from the 50 red and black and orange and blue, and being divided like that, unfortunately. Those days are few and far between with college football in general, but it still remains true here. So I know a lot of folks have some wonderful memories of this game.
Yeah, I certainly do. I mean, I've been to it as a student, I've been to it as an alum, and I've been to it as a media member. But it's just the last few times that you mentioned the favorite usually winning out. The last couple of times, yeah, it's been Florida with absolutely no chance of winning this football game. Right now, they're sitting at about a 21-point underdog to the Bulldogs. It's a big redemption for Florida quarterback Anthony Richardson. Big redemption moment for him. His first start came against the Bulldogs when Dan Mullen, to many people's, I don't know, I guess to many people's chagrin, threw Anthony to the wolves, so to speak. What do you think about him being able to come back and maybe, change that narrative a little bit?
Well, he certainly will have the chance in order to do it. Now, I still say Florida's greatest strength is their running backs and their offensive line. They have been, I think, the most consistent. I mean, when you can average basically a couple hundred yards a game rushing most of the time, and the quarterbacks have only been sacked 5 times. I mean, that's really impressive. So that tells me the offensive line or the running backs have done a good job. I think one thing they need to do, Jake, is to get these running backs in space and throw them the ball. I'm a little surprised they haven't done more of that collectively as a group. The running backs haven't caught very many passes. So I think that's something that could change. But I think with Richardson, I'm really wondering if they may just try to cut him loose and see what he can do and just throwing the ball vertically. And again, he did well against Tennessee, but this is a different defense. It's a much better defense than what Tennessee has too. So, but Jake, if Richardson could just play a clean game and not make just inexplicable throws that end up being interceptions and just play within himself, they certainly are concerned about him as a runner. So, and he could do some damage with that. But again, for them to win the game, he would have to just have an outstanding passing game. And to me, the only way he could really do that would be to, instead of throwing 3 interceptions, let's throw none and be able to move the ball with your feet and be able to spread the ball around. I think that will be more, if he's going to have some success, that will be one of the ways to do it. And look, this still is a good Georgia defense. There's no denying that. But truthfully, with their injuries that we'll get into, and with their performance this year, this is still nothing like what they've had certainly last year with the as far as the number of sacks. They've only got 7 sacks to this point of the season. Now, last year at the end of the year, they had 42. So, I mean, to get anywhere near that, they would really have to up the ante as far as pressuring the quarterback. And Kirby would tell you sacks aren't everything. The deal now is pressuring the quarterback. So, but I think the point is still that there's a lot Florida can do, but a lot of it will rest on Richardson's shoulders. And Jake, if he could play a clean game, that will make a humongous difference.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned just sacks not being as important now because guys can get away from them. People mentioning that Florida has one of the best rushing offenses in the country. Well, Georgia just so happens to have one of the best rushing defenses in the country, allowing about under 90 yards a game.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference too. And again, what is Florida going to be able to do to mix up the run game, and also, as we mentioned earlier, to get these guys in space? I think it's going to be very important. But I think something that's also going to be important for Florida is you may not have success with the run game early, but they don't need to quit running the ball. And I don't mean just being stubborn and run on every play, but Georgia's and look, one thing about this Georgia team that you have seen is they can be pretty lackadaisical in the first half for whatever reason, and then they're able to make adjustments and are able to get it together in the second half. Now, obviously they had this struggle with Missouri, and I give Missouri a lot of credit. That game was on the road, and they had a lot of injuries, and Missouri played out of their mind, frankly. But I do think it's going to be important that Florida continues to run, even in with Richardson or Etienne or Montrell Johnson, because at some point you can probably get one of these guys loose in that next level of the Georgia defense, and that's when it's going to pay off.
Yeah, I think people saw what happened when Anthony Richardson gets loose plenty of times, most recently against LSU. It seems those running backs, neither one seems to get enough carries just because of how good they are. I think there's starting to grow some factions between who should be the lead tailback, whether it's Montrell Johnson or Etienne. And once you think one guy might have the upper hand, boom, here comes another. Here comes, whether it's Johnson doing something well, boom, Etienne will come back and he'll get you down the field. Apologize to anybody if they're having trouble with audio. We did have some audio issues to start out. You're wondering where Shane is. Shane is being a big-time professional football coach. He had some XFL things to deal with today. So I am here, but don't worry, there's still some legitimacy to the broadcast because Brent is here giving us some opinion. And so with that, Brent, I feel like for this game, everybody talks about, if you're a so-and-so fan, you probably want this team to win. And, with the SEC, it's hard to make that assumption. But I would think if you're Tennessee, you got to be rooting for the Gators a little bit to get the win this weekend against Georgia, considering they have to play the Bulldogs later on.
Yeah, and look, things are really going to ramp up for Georgia over the next few weeks, and frankly, for both of those teams, Tennessee in a big game with Kentucky this weekend, and then obviously Georgia with Florida, Tennessee, Mississippi State, and they can't ignore that game either, and then Kentucky. So Georgia's tests are upcoming in beginning Saturday, and I'm not necessarily going to say Georgia sleptwalked through the schedule, but I think we knew, didn't we, Jake, when we saw that Georgia schedule in the beginning of the year, that Georgia was going to have an easy time on the front end, and now that changes with all these Eastern Division and Western Division foes, that they're going to have to step up their game, and frankly, and again, the Tennessee game with Georgia also being in Athens, that's a afternoon game next week on CBS. You can see why that's the SEC game of the week along that line too. But yes, I'm sure a lot of Tennessee fans would love to see Florida win, but Jake, you know good and well, it's hard for Tennessee fans to root for either team, right?
I mean, yeah, you kind of have to pick who you hate less in the moment at that point.
Yes. Yes.
But I would think if you're trying to get to Atlanta, you gotta hope the Gators win a little bit, because you can get the 1-2 punch. You know, Georgia losing in Jacksonville, and then the next week, if you could beat them in Athens, that all but punches your ticket to the SEC championship game if you get past Kentucky and don't screw up anything in the month of November.
Well, and this Tennessee team's been amazing, frankly. In this Kentucky game is going to be a real challenge for them, because Kentucky is legitimate. Now, they obviously had a very difficult game recently with Ole Miss, but the reality is Will Levis is healthy and he is back. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the league. To me, the game changer for Kentucky is Chris Rodriguez, the running back, who can go for not just 100 but 200 yards, basically at any given game. Kabasi Smoke and running backs in the top 30. Tavion Robinson is in the top 20 as far as receivers, and they've got a little freshman. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch him yet, Jake, but this Varian Brown that they've got as a kick returner and also as a receiver is really incredible. The offensive line for Kentucky is really bad. I mean, they basically among the leaders, if you can use that term, in sacks allowed. So they're going to have to do a good job against the Tennessee defensive line. I think the Kentucky defense, frankly, is very good, although Jacquez Jones is going to be out with this game. But Kentucky is very capable of giving Tennessee a lot of trouble. So, Jake, I'm just guessing there, as well as they played, Tennessee's full attention will be on Kentucky. They'll certainly take a peek at that Georgia game, but at the same time, very, very, if any teams have played as well as Tennessee has in this age of 7-on-7 football, where you basically have to have an elite quarterback and elite wide receivers. Tennessee basically has that, and I think still, Jake, people are still amazed at how quickly that Tennessee and Josh Heupel have been able to turn this thing around.
Yeah, it's night and day from what we saw with, I mean, take a pick, Jeremy Pruitt, Butch Jones, Derek Dooley, who is an analyst at the University of Alabama now. That still is hilarious to me. So it's just a whole recollection for them. I'm sure it's been a great experience. Someone has actually, if you didn't know, you know how they threw the goalpost into the river, like to mimic what they did all those years ago. Yeah. Someone has actually tagged it on Google Maps. So if you look up Tennessee goalpost in Knoxville, I'm pretty sure you will find a location of it in the Tennessee River, and actually can see photos of it sitting there underneath the water.
Yeah, I wonder if some fraternity actually tries to get that out, Jake, and put it in the backyard or something of that nature. That would be interesting to see. But I mean, that certainly tells you about that fan base and how excited that they are. Now, what we don't know too about Tennessee is how soon Cedric Tillman is going to come back. And now Brew McCoy's done a really good job for them. And the other thing we don't know is Jalen McCullough, their veteran safety, who got in some trouble with a legal issue, where that's going to go. Now, obviously, Jalen Hyatt has been just absolutely unbelievable in how he has played. So, but Tennessee has certainly given even the the media a little bit thought, and I'm not saying that this is going to happen. There would have to be a lot of things that would fall in place about the possibility of if Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama all end up with just one loss, could we possibly have 3 SEC teams in the playoffs? Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. That would certainly be interesting conversation. But, Jake, I will say this. In the next few years, thankfully, when we're going to expand the playoffs, if we had a situation like that, absolutely, we will have 3 SEC teams in the playoffs. In most years, that's probably going to be the case.
Yeah, exactly. Tell you about Celebration Point a little bit. Celebration Point is where Gators come to celebrate with premium brands like the Keys Bar and Grill, Medici's, Regal Cinemas, Dave & Buster's, Nike, and La Macaron, the Gadget Guys, and the HBZ's Restaurant Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. Now selling Head Beer Coach American Lager in 16-ounce cans, available at Spurrier's, Visor's Rooftop, or at Gator Games at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. We will see you at Celebration Point, where Gators come to celebrate. Yeah, Brent, the committees are still meeting about this expanded playoff that you've mentioned. Still not sure whether it's going to be coming in, the next year, 2 years, or after 2026, in terms of implementing that format. But I want to ask your question. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to talk about this, but do you think this expanded playoff helps or hurts college football?
Oh, I think it's one of the greatest things that's ever happened to it, frankly. And I've always looked at it for 2 reasons. One would be the accessibility. In other words, look, we've got conferences now to where if we don't expand the playoffs, they're not going to have a representative in the conference. For example, the Pac-12. If as difficult a time as that conference has had as of late, now it's good to see USC and UCLA coming on, and hopefully that will continue. But otherwise, they really have not had any representatives there. And frankly, Jake, for the ACC, if it's not Clemson, they're probably not going to have one. So I think it's for accessibility. And to me, the big thing for it is right now, as we near the end of October, next week will be in November. And by the way, next Tuesday starts the first televised meeting as far as the results for the playoff poll. So that's the one that really matters. And as they start to meet, and we'll know more of what's going on. Look, we've got maybe what? We get 4 teams, so we've got probably 8 to 10 fan bases in November who are really involved, and they're watching every move their team and the committee makes. Now, if we expand this thing to 12, we're going to probably double that. And to have the excitement for college football, look, we're going to have excitement regardless in November because of rivalry games and teams trying to get in the playoffs. But to me, that just expands, which means instead of 8 to 10 fan bases that are really dialed in, I think you're going to have as many as 20 to 25. So any way that we can improve the excitement, that's going to help. Now, that's going to change some things because we're going to start the season basically is going to start a week early, which means week 0 is going to become the first week of the season. I think this is going to mean hopefully every team is going to have not 1 but 2 bye weeks. And then the thing that's going to happen too is we're probably going to have the SEC championship game and the other championship games. Get this, Jake, on Thanksgiving weekend instead of that being rivalry weekend. It's going to change the calendar, to say the least. We don't have dates yet, as you mentioned. The committee and the commissioners are still meeting. But what's changed this, and it all comes down to money still, doesn't it, Jake? The presidents
when does
given, the presidents have given the commissioners, look, we want this done, and we want this done as soon as possible, and that's why now we're under a time crunch.
Yes, exactly. We'll get some more of Brent Beaird's thoughts here. About to take a break. I'll tell you about Chris Doring Mortgage before we go. Chris Doring Mortgage, they do mortgage lending right, helping home buyers throughout Gainesville and North Central Florida. Call Chris Doring Mortgage today at 352-244-0840. We're going to pay some bills really quick, and then we'll be back with Brent Beaird until the top of the hour. Get some more of your comments and more of Brent's thoughts. Stay right here.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. Our premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Meldon Law, the only official law firm partner of the Florida Gators. Peachland Dental, Gator Nation's first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. Comfort Temp, comfort is our business, peace of mind is our promise. QC Kinetics, live pain-free with QC Kinetics. Our gridiron sponsors are Auto ER, UF Bookstores, Celebration Point Town Center, Chris Doring Mortgage, Silverback Concrete Co., Ruse Ogra State Farm Insurance, Doreen Wiebe Realtor Caldwell Banker MM Parish. Our touchdown sponsors are Campus USA Credit Union, Adams Rib Company, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Gator Bait Media, Okido America, Style Cuts, Ironwood Golf Course, Big Mills Cheesesteaks, MB Listing, McDonald's of Gainesville, 84 Lumber, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, Avra and Smith, Dowling Signs, Baker's Sporting Goods, Silver Cube Billiards and Sports Bar. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, visit potupwithshane.com and click the Advertise button. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the show. If you like what we are doing here, make sure you follow us and support the businesses that support us.
And we're back. I'm here with Brent Beaird of First Coast News. This is Jake Hitt filling in for Shane. Shane's being a big-time professional football coach, so I'm filling in for him today and tomorrow. So if you don't like me tomorrow too, just don't watch. But like you hear with Brent Beaird, Sean is asking Brent on Facebook Live, will the SEC go to a 10-game schedule when they add Texas and Oklahoma?
Well, the answer to that is no, but yes, they're at 8 now. But what the thing they're going to do is go to 9. And now, when Oklahoma and Texas join, and we're still not quite sure when that's going to be. What we're hearing out of the Big 12 is that that's probably going to be in 2024, 2025, maybe more 2025. But the thing they're going to do that we think is they're going to do, and this is important too, that they're going to do away with divisions like some conferences have already done or going to do, and they're going to take the 2 best teams with the 2 best records, and they will play in Atlanta. But the thing they're looking at now is the intermediate step will be going to 9 games instead of 8. And now what that will do, Jake, is that will, and look, athletic directors have been clamoring, and fans have too, about having a better schedule. So, in other words, say of Florida, instead of playing the Sisters of the Poor, they may be playing Arkansas or Alabama or Mississippi State or someone like that. And look, and I get it, Jake. If you're a fan and you're paying all this money and you're tired of not playing real good competition, in regards to what school it is, having that 9th game, I think for fans will be a real plus. So they may eventually go to 10. That's a really good question. But in the intermediate, at some point over the next few years, and they'd argue about this for years, that they're actually going to 9 and I think that will probably satisfy most people.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Fans don't want to go see their team play. The FCS schools, the
Right.
Eastern Washingtons, the lower Group of Five schools. But then I'll hear fans saying, "Hey, where's our cupcake teams that we get to warm up in the
Yeah.
year?"
Oh, yeah.
Florida started out with a brutal start of the schedule, a lot of home games, and not many breaks in between. Now
Right.
they didn't make it easy on themselves with the USF game, but it's hard to say, "Hey, we want to play quality opponents." Well, you're playing a quality opponent every single week. Your chances of having that game where you could just kind of breathe go down a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, it is. So that's the shifting that we're beginning to see in scheduling. So, and again, look, Oklahoma and Texas are going to be better eventually than they are now, or at least we think they are. So that's going to be a fascinating addition when that comes to the league. But and the other thing with this, and I won't belabor the point here long, but look, I get the point, and I hear this from writers and officials and other people with some of these lower division schools, and I get the point that look, we play these games so that we can meet our budget. So some of this stuff is necessary. I've often wondered, Jake, for say a spring game, if we wouldn't be better off playing some of these games at that point. I don't know if the coaches would ever allow that, but it would still allow us to have the game, and these teams will get a little bit of money and so forth. But that's something that we really can't overlook too. So I get where the fans are. I get the point that you got to sell tickets and you want to see better games and so forth. But still, the bottom line is the league is going to 9, and it's just a matter of time.
Yeah. Somebody said with 9 games, several weaker teams will lose that 6th win in bowl eligibility.
Well, look, that's an astute point, and the problem is I don't know how that will be addressed. That'll be interesting. Now, again, if you have a situation, and we've had this happen, to where if the bowls are struggling to get teams because of your APR, some of these teams have been even a 5 and 7 team has been allowed to be in a bowl game, so it may be covered with that. But that is a good point. I mean, if you add another game, there's always a chance to have another loss. But the reality of it is, I still think, Jake, it's going to happen just because of what we're looking at. And again, these athletic directors, and I understand this, they want another revenue stream, and certainly having a 9th game would do that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Why do you think Joe Oliva wanted to keep that game when Florida wanted them to come to Gainesville?
Sure, absolutely.
They wanted that sweet revenue money from having a home game.
Yes.
But let me tell you about Peachland Dentistry. Speaking of business, Peachland Dentistry, Gator Nation's #1 choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte and surrounding areas. Visit them at peachlanddental.com and join us on Friday for our Peachland Dentistry JC and the QB weekend picks. That remains to be seen if we'll be doing that. It'll be JC and the Beard will be doing weekend picks if that does come to fruition. So, Brent, we got a couple really good games this weekend. Obviously, the Florida Georgia game that everybody will be watching at 3:30. Tennessee, Kentucky later that night. But at noon, Ohio State and Penn State. How do you feel about that matchup?
I think Ohio State's just playing too well right now, frankly. And look, I know they're, Jake, have you seen that they're a 15-point favorite in this game? And look, I get some of that. Penn State, and look, Coach Franklin has done okay with them, but James Franklin has not elevated Penn State to where a lot of people thought that would happen. But I still think Ohio State's just playing way too well at this point. And I mean, obviously, as a Heisman voter, I'm paying close attention to C.J. Stroud and how he's doing. Ohio State, Shane and I talked about this last week. Their strength of schedule was like 86th in the nation. And Shane made a really good point about this. Ohio State's just one of those teams you look at and they pass the eye test. So if they continue to win, they will certainly be in the playoffs as this goes along. But no, that's always going to be a fascinating game. But I think Ohio State's just got way too much for them at that point too. Now, Jake, the good thing is, speaking of Big Ten football, is there probably aren't a lot of Iowa fans around here, and I don't know if people have really seen this, but and I like Kirk Ferentz. I think he's a good football coach. The problem is his son is the offensive coordinator, and they cannot bust a grape scoring at this point. They've got a game in Northwestern coming up. And that thing could be what, Jake, 10-9 or something like that. So you've kind of got the extremes to where you've got an Ohio State team that can lay 50 points on you at the drop of a hat, and then you've got an Iowa team. Jake, I don't know if they can score 50 points in a month.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be an absolute rock fight. If you're just a complete sick in the head individual, you'll be watching that football game. It's fun. It's just funny seeing Kirk Ferentz just go completely Bobby Bowden here. Remember when Bobby had his son Jeff be the offensive coordinator after they were good at, they were offensive juggernaut for so many years. It just kind of went right off the grid. Fell right off the table. That seems to be the same thing with Brian Ferentz, but Iowa just doesn't have the same pedigree that Florida State has on offense.
No, they really don't. But
at its finest, if you want to make a joke about it.
Well, and the unfortunate thing is, Ferentz was critical of some of the media who were asking legitimate questions this week about, well, Coach, what are you going to do in the currently and also in the off season with his offense? So he throws it back on the media, which is not a good look for him. But the reality is, I mean, you've got a situation in Spencer Petras, their quarterback. He is, I mean, he's tied for 129th in the nation with 2 touchdown passes. Jake, could you imagine in the SEC if you had a team that basically at times had more punts than they did points? If this was going on with an SEC team, that they would be riding in the streets, would they not? If they had an offense that bad,
I don't know. If you look down at College Station, that just might be on the verge of happening here, if not for $95 million.
Yes. And look, things aren't going well, to say the least, at Texas A&M, and obviously they've got to do something and come up with some answers that at this point I don't think that they're going to have. They've got Ole Miss that's coming in, and Ole Miss has played well this year, but there's a lot of pressure now on Jimbo Fisher because this thing just really has not worked out. The buyout is something like $85 million, so he's not going to be fired at the end of the year. But you've got a situation where they've suspended players this week. They've had offensive linemen who have got hurt. They're out for the year. And as a matter of fact, I'll give Billy Lucci credit for this from Texags, that 3 members of that number 1 recruiting class were suspended with a locker room incident. But again, with a lot of promise coming up, that people thought this A&M team, do you remember Desmond Howard on game day for their early predictions predicted A&M to be a playoff team? So that has not played very well at that point either. But A&M has not had a Division I game with 300 yards passing since October of 2020. So their offense has struggled. I think Connor Wheatman, their freshman, will probably end up there eventually. But a lot of pressure on A&M, and Jake, SEC fans, I don't think they're sharing a lot of sympathy right now for Jimbo Fisher, are they?
No, just it's just kind of I don't want to say interesting, but it's just funny seeing the Jimbo walk the walk or talk the talk that he did in the quote unquote talking season that we always mention around that time, and just to completely come out and face plant. I mean, not live up to any expectations, and almost have A&M fans maybe pining for the days of Kellen Mond, which I don't know if that's something that you want to pine for, but
yeah, really,
it is just laughable how someone could have so much momentum and in a year where you made a New Year's Six bowl and just completely not live up to the expectations that set.
I don't know if people have seen this, but the SEC coaches have a teleconference every Wednesday morning. Lane Kiffin was on yesterday and was asked about A&M and specifically asked about DJ Durkin going to Texas A&M. And Lane's comment was, well, we tried to keep him, but we got outbid, which is a common theme with that school. Now, Jake, how many coaches could, number one, can get by with that? And number two, how many coaches would actually say that during the, and I'm sure you've been on these, on what is normally a very, shall we say, sterile, uneventful Wednesday morning teleconference with coaches?
Yeah. I don't look. Lane's a volume shooter. Even if he misses his last shots, he's going to keep going. But I don't know if I'd be talking that much for a guy who got dog walked in Baton Rouge the week prior.
Yeah, they did. But again, they've had a nice year. But there's two things there. One, they did have a lot of injuries. Zach Evans did not play. The TCU transfer for Ole Miss. That was difficult for them. But to your other point, the other team that you really got to watch out for that's really playing well is LSU. And LSU's off this week, and they've got a gargantuan game next week with Alabama. And look, we've got basically two virtually divisional deciding games, or at least that will go a long way in deciding who's going to win the West and the East with Alabama and LSU and Tennessee and Georgia. That's coming up next week. But I give Brian Kelly a lot of credit. I think Brian, he made a lot of people laugh with all these videos and trying to be Southern and so forth. But they've settled down, and obviously Gator fans are aware of this too. Jaden Daniels has become a really good dual threat quarterback. Their defense has stepped it up, frankly, another notch. Also, this Harold Perkins at linebacker has been really good. Matt House, their defensive coordinator, has done a remarkable job with second half adjustments. So, Jake, to put it mildly, people need to watch this LSU team very closely because they have come on like gangbusters the second half of the season.
Yeah, it's been crazy, and you know, it's you mentioned Brian Kelly. He did a very interesting thing. I don't know how anybody else would feel about it, but he did a very interesting thing when LSU put this out after the Florida win, using Florida's Tom Petty third quarter tradition to motivate his team. You know, quoting it in the meeting room, talking about not backing down, and I don't know. That was just something that stuck with me. Is like, this is a guy who uses other teams, you know, motivating factors to kind of get his team in the right mindset.
Well, Kelly, and people criticize him, but look, if you're at Notre Dame and you break Newt Rockney's record, you know what you're doing. And Kelly started off slowly, obviously, with that difficult loss to Florida State. And what they've done this year, they seem to start slowly, and then they really ramp it up, which is basically what they did against Ole Miss. And they play really well in the second half. So to your point, he is not afraid at all to use whatever motivation that he can do, and if that needles the opposing fans, he's okay about that. But the reality is, it's going to be fascinating to watch him. I've always thought that he's a really solid coach, and particularly after Ed Orgeron. I mean, look, if Ed Orgeron can win a national championship at LSU, what could Brian Kelly eventually do there too?
Exactly. And let me tell you about something that happened in sports history today. I'll give you two things, Brent. I don't know how much of a baseball fan you are, but today, on October 27th, 2011, in the dead of night, St. Louis Cardinals third baseman David Freese hit a game-tying two-run triple with 2 outs in the ninth when his team's facing elimination, and then later in the 11th hit a walk-off home run. It shared the anniversary of the Cardinals winning the World Series against the Tigers, and who was MVP of that World Series? Or is David Eckstein.
That's right. Yeah. And by the way, the World Series is just a few days away. Is it Friday when that begins?
Yes, and like every day. The only day they don't play is on Thursday when the Eagles play. Yeah,
being a Braves fan, I was certainly disappointed they went out early. But boy, the Phillies are just on fire, aren't they, Jake? And look, does Houston get the credit? And we won't turn this to necessarily into baseball conversation, but it's worth mentioning. But does Houston get the credit for how well they played over the last several years?
I don't know. I think the cheating scandal probably has tarnished anybody outside of the Houston area giving any sort of credit to the Astros.
Agreed.
You know, and I don't think Florida fans will give Georgia any credit. Just to wrapping up here a little bit, like I said, the Gators a 21-point underdog. You mentioned Kelly using bulletin board material like that, going off of what I said. Do you think Billy Napier points to that spread and says, look, nobody thinks you're going to even sniff coming in within 3 scores of this team?
Yeah, well, that will be certainly big motivation for them. And look, I've said this often on this segment. Gator fans, I think they are, but they need to continue to be patient regardless of where this game goes. I still think they're headed in the right direction. They've got the right coach in Napier, in this staff. It's just going to take them a long time to get players, but the recruiting has improved considerably. I still think they will have a top 10 class, certainly if not top 5 before it's over, frankly, and really impressed with the job that he's done. And, Jake, can I throw a note of irony in here that one Dan Mullen will make his game broadcast debut as the color guy tonight on Virginia Tech and NC State. That if you're looking for Thursday night college football and a reason to watch, that would be another one, right?
Yeah, you gonna watch? I'll be watching.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I think it's. Look. I think Dan is a great football mind, so it's going to be really great to have him in the booth. It's just a matter if he's good enough for television. Most people don't like announcers nowadays.
Yeah, true. But look, he did. Mullen was on the SEC championship game last year, and people were kind of worried about how he would do. The truth of the matter is, he really did well. And your point's a good one. As far as knowing the game and picking up tendencies and things of that nature, Mullen has always and will always do a really good job of that. I'm sure he still wants to coach again, probably, but frankly, I think he'll do better as a broadcaster, Jake, than people think he will.
Yeah, the Tony Romo experience probably for him. But that'll do it for our show today. Thanks to Brent Beaird for sticking with us the whole hour. Thanks to Jason, our producer, and Tammy, our other producer. We'll be back tomorrow. JC will be joining us. Maybe we'll make some picks. But for now, we'll see you guys later.